You want to go ahead and turn to Romans chapter 13 and verse 12. Romans 13 and verse 12. That'll be our first portion of Scripture this morning. What did you put on this morning? Well, I think we'll look around and find out what everybody put on this morning. But you know, every morning we get up and we put something on. That's how we exist as human beings. That's one of the many things that separates us from everything else, is the fact that we are conscious of not having clothing on. Matter of fact, that's one of the ways that Adam and Eve realized that their eyes were open and they realized that they were naked. They had nothing on. They weren't walking around with clothing on. That's part of us as human beings, right? We get up in the morning and we get out of bed and we put something on, whatever it might be. The fact that you're sitting here this morning means that you consciously decided to put clothing on and come to worship, right? That's what, I don't see anybody here undressed, and that's good. That's a good thing. If you didn't put something on, likely your spouse or your child would notice the error and the omission and would bring it to your attention. Then they would help you take charge of that and do something about it, which is a good thing for us to do. They want to make sure that you're appropriately dressed, and appropriately, of course, has something to do with it as well. There's appropriate dress for all kinds of things. If you're going to go for a dip in the pool, I'm not going to jump in like this, right? I'm going to dress appropriately for that. If I want to go for a walk I'm not going to dress in a certain way. If I do go for a walk, I'm going to dress a specific way. There are ways in which we are appropriately dressed, and it's important that we realize this. When we get up, we put something on. And I'm sure by now you've noticed that men and women get dressed differently, don't they? Yeah. Men have a significantly different attitude towards dress and a different method of getting dressed, right? I get up on Sundays, average about 30 minutes later than my wife. The reason is I can get up and I can shower and I can shave, and 5 minutes later I'm ready to go. I'm ready to head out the door. I'm ready to get out of here. Women are a little bit different, are they not? Women take a significantly greater interest in how they're attired before they walk out of the house. And I know, especially you go back a little bit further, and women who believe that you don't walk out of the house unless you're dressed in a particular fashion. Everything has to be just right, especially to come to services. You go through all the emotions, and you go through all of the ups and downs of picking something and realizing that's not quite right, and then you pick something else, and and then all of a sudden you come to a final decision, but then you're not finished once you put on the dress, right? There's other things. There's accoutrements to the dress that have to be decided on, right? Back in the day, it was pick out the strand of pearls, pick out the gloves, all of those things that go on. The handbag has to match. I didn't know that. Handbag is just something to carry stuff in. I didn't realize no. Handbag is a part of the outfit, and it has to go along with what you're wearing. It has to match. And I didn't realize that handbags matched specific things. Shoes have to match. See, for guys, shoes just have to match the belt, and even then, it's kind of if you might probably get away with it not matching. No, that's not the way it works with ladies. Ladies, they take a great deal of pride in their appearance, and they may want to make sure that when they walk out the door, because they're not just dressing for themselves, they're dressing for others. Men basically dress for themselves. As long as we don't embarrass our wives, we're pretty good to go. Women's not that way. They're dressing for themselves, they're dressing for their husband, they're dressing for everybody that they come in contact with. It's one of those things that you learn over time. But hats, scarves, earrings, makeup, handbags all bring together this look that the lady is looking for, she's striving for. And what she puts on is important to her. Okay? So, with that in mind, I wonder sometimes if our Christianity, our putting on of Christ, is our clothing ourselves, or it's an accoutrement, if it's an accessory. There's a difference between walking out of the house without a belt on versus walking out of the house without pants on, right? You can walk out of the house without a belt on. I've done that on many occasions. it slips my mind. It's not, the pants are comfortable, so I don't realize I don't need a belt to hold them up or anything like that. And I walk out of the house, and I forget my belt, especially if I'm in a casual state of affairs. But it would be a big difference if I walked out of the house with pants on with no belt versus walking out of the house with a belt on and no pants. One of those, I'm inappropriately dressed. The other one, I'm just lacking a little something. But how often I wonder sometimes if our Christianity is, what is it? Is it the dress? Is it the apparel that we put on? Or is it simply an accessory to everything else that we have going on? I belong to a civic organization, and we have a number of people who are members. But like anything else, you've got a group of people and a lot of members, and you know that most of the work is done by a smaller percentage of the group. And it's no different with this organization. And I've noticed that there are a great many people who are on the rolls as members, but I've never seen them at a meeting. When we have events and we put on charitable things for the kids that we serve, I've never seen them at any of those things. But I've gone to their personal website, and I've gone to their Facebook page, and I've gone to all these places where they present themselves to the public at large. And you know what's in big letters? Member of Kiwanis. I'm a member of Kiwanis. It's a civic organization. We just help kids. That's all it is. But I've noticed that they put in big letters, Kiwanian for 20 years, 15 years. They've never participated. All they do is pay their dues, and then they're able to put their name, put that nomenclature behind their name. So I know for a fact that they don't put that much effort into it, although they claim it. So we have to ask ourselves, is our Christianity something that we simply throw on at the last moment before we leave, like a hat or a pair of sunglasses? Is it that? Or is it the apparel that we wear to be appropriately attired? Because there are those who believe that Christianity is something, it's just one more thing to put in their resume as a human being. I'm all of these things. Oh yeah, I'm a Christian too. A Christian too. T-O-O. I'm a Christian as well. But see, as the Christian, we identify as Christian, and everything else comes in a distant second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth to being a child of God. So we have to be careful. So what do Christians put on when they become New Testament Christians? When we put Christianity on, what is it that Christians actually put on? Do we tailor everything in our lives to enhance our service to Christ, or do we tailor our Christianity to fit in with our secular lives? Because we have to be careful about that, don't we? We have to be very careful that we don't find ourselves doing that. That we tailor our Christianity to fit everything else that's going on. When we're with a group of people, are we careful about how we speak so as not to offend those who are outside of the church? Do we refrain from discussions about spiritual matters simply because those that we're with don't talk about such things, and we don't want to make them feel uncomfortable? There are other ways we can do that without basically denying Christ. We have to be careful that we don't do that. But what do Christians put on when we put Christianity on? Well, Romans chapter 13, verse 12 gives us some insight. Let's look at a little bit what the scriptures have to say. So what do we put on? The night is far gone. The day is at hand. So then, let us cast off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. So this is one of the things that we put on when we put on New Testament Christianity. When we become a New Testament Christian, we put on the armor of light. Well, it sounds like good advice, doesn't it? I mean, everything about that sounds good. Armor, good. Light, good. We don't want to be in darkness anymore. Well, it sounds like a good idea, and we're casting off the works of darkness. So what are the works of darkness? We have to understand what that is. We can't put on the armor of light unless we first cast off the works of darkness. We can't have both at the same time, right? We can't be in sin and in Christ at the same time. We have to determine which one we're going to do. So if we're going to put on this armor of light that sounds so great for us to do, first we have to cast off the works of darkness. Well, let's look. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 3 and 4. Paul's admonition to the Ephesians, and he's giving them. Once again, that's what I love about the Scriptures. The Scriptures are not vague, as some people count it. A lot of people say, well, it's kind of hard to tell what he's saying here. No, it's not hard to tell at all. He's very specific about what we're supposed to be doing. Ephesians 5, verses 3 and 4. Here's Paul admonishing the Ephesians. He's exhorting them. He says, But sexual immorality and all impurity of covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. So here's a couple of works of darkness that we have to cast off in order to put on this armor of light. Sexual immorality, impurity of covetousness. We don't continue to lust after the things of this world. In some ways, it's a sexual immorality, and we have to be careful that that's not in our lives. That immorality, you think about how many lives have been ruined because of sexual immorality. Porneia, the idea, is sexual sin. That must not even be named among us, not even whispered about. You know, we have to be very careful because it says that we must avoid even the appearance of evil. But you find that the Christians, I think we get so caught up in our own invincibility in Christ that we don't realize that, you know what, sometimes we can do things that are going to lead people to believe something about us that we can take care of beforehand. We can avoid it ever even being a problem, but we have to be on guard against all of those things. We can't just assume, well, I'm a member of the Lord's church. Nobody's going to think that about me. I beg to differ. Unfortunately, sometimes even in the church, people will think that, much less the outside of the church. So we have to be careful. So even the appearance of evil must be avoided. But certainly, if the appearance is avoided, if we got to be careful even about the appearance, that means that even the physical act must be cast off. It is a work of darkness. It will keep us out of the light. We will not be able to put on the armor of light if these things are in our lives. All right, let's continue on. We know immorality, impurity of covetousness. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place. There's no place in the Christian's life for that kind of behavior. You notice he's talking about actual behavior here. There are things that we're not supposed to do because we're Christian. Not because it's a bad idea with the people that we're with. It doesn't mean that we abstain from it simply when we're in presence of other Christians. It means at all times. Once again, not even the appearance of evil should be in the Christian's life. So we have to get rid of all of those things. Is that easy to have happen? No, not always. There are habits that form in our lives, and it is one of the most difficult things to get rid of a habit, especially a bad habit, and especially if it's been in our lives for quite some time. It's difficult to do, but it must be done. God doesn't say, well, you know, if it's hard, don't worry about it. If it's difficult, don't sweat it. I've got this. You keep doing what you're doing, and I'll overlook that. No, that's not what he says. The acts of darkness must be cast off. Who casts them off? Nobody else can cast them off for us. When you cast off, it means that you physically do it. You do it yourself. It's not for anyone else to do, anyone else to take care of in our lives. It's for us to do and us to do only. In verse 11, it says, after giving an example of each of these things, he says, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness. Take no part in them, but instead do what? Expose them. Now, that's fair enough. I'm willing to put these things off. If I want to put on the armor of light, I'm willing to put these things off. They are improper, they are out of place, and they are unfruitful. They won't do anything for me. Or there will be no good fruit that will come from them. There will be bad fruit that will come from them. It's the same idea. If you plant a tree, you plant a fruit tree, and you go out and you get ready to get the fruit. And I've given this example several times. It still aggravates me. That plum tree I had, it still grates on my nerve. I was so excited, and I was so excited about getting fruit from this tree. But every time I went out there, the wasps had gotten it, and they had rotted on the tree, and they would fall off. And then I have yellow jackets all over the ground, and they're rotten, and they stink, and it was never a good situation. I never once had a really good crop from it. That's how disappointing it is, and that's the idea of being unfruitful. I got fruit, but was it good? No. Wasn't good to eat, wasn't good to use. I certainly wouldn't give it to anybody. I couldn't even give it away. That's the idea. There are good fruits that come in our lives, when we're in the light, and there are bad fruits that come when we're in darkness. That's why we cast off these unfruitful works, because they won't do anything good for us. So I want to be a saint. I want to cast off the bad. But why do I need to put on this armor of light? You know, we talk about we have to be appropriately dressed. We need to put on something that is appropriate for the occasion. Well, the armor of light is appropriate for the occasion. That's what we need to put on if we're going to live this life and we're going to remain faithful. We got to have armor on. But why do we need to put on this armor? Why do I need to put on the armor of light? What does that even mean to have the armor of light on? Well, we have to ask a question. What dispels darkness but light alone? Darkness doesn't dispel darkness. It doesn't get just ultra dark. It doesn't get darker. It's either dark or it's either completely dark or there's a little bit of light. Right? You know, we could. I've been in places. You know, everybody's been in these caverns where they turn off lights and there's nothing. You know, when there's nothing but darkness all over the place and you feel that claustrophobia because you don't know where you are, and you feel that claustrophobia closing in, you know, even the tiniest little bit of light gives a little bit of comfort, doesn't it? Well, that's exactly what he's talking about here. When there's nothing but darkness, even the smallest amount of light is a welcome relief. But what dispels darkness but light? Nothing. So we have to have that armor of light to dispel the darkness. The armor is the light, and the light is the armor. That's what he's saying here. The armor is the light. When we put that on, it's not an armor that shines up. The light itself is the armor. That's what it consists of. Well, if it's light, and it's the armor of light, where does it come from? God is the light, and in him is no darkness. So we know that if there is an armor of light, it must of necessity come from God himself. That's the only place it can come from. Only God can dispel the darkness of this world. And when we put on that armor of light that we know comes from him, we have a power to overcome. We have the ability to repel. We have the ability to remain pure because we're clothed in armor that only God could give us. And only God could give us that kind of armor. He's the only one that could give us something that could dispel the powers of darkness. In Ephesians chapter 5, verses 8 and 10, Ephesians 5, 8 and 10, it tells us, for at one time you were darkness. Listen, that's hard for a lot of people to hear because, you know, a lot of people, even before they become a New Testament Christian, have claimed Christ. And they say, I've lived a good life. I've done all good things. And I've you know, I went to church. I did all of these things. And you know, I've always claimed to Christ. But that's not what he says. It said, until you become a New Testament Christian in the way that I've told you to become a New Testament Christian, you yourselves were darkness. Hard for people to believe and hard for people to understand. I was raised in the church. I was brought up doing all of the things that I felt were necessary and all the things that were necessary. But you know what? Until I became a New Testament Christian, I was in darkness. No matter how often I sat in the pew, no matter how often I heard a sermon, no matter how often I went to Bible school and did all of these things, I was still in darkness until I became a New Testament Christian. When sin entered my life, it was a desperate time because I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm in this quandary because I've been raised to understand the truth. I've done all these things, but sin is in my life, and I had to realize that even if I sat in the building and did all of the things that New Testament Christians do, I was still in darkness. That was hard for me to understand. It was hard for me to, and that's what spurred me on to make the decision to become a New Testament Christian. It took a little bit of time. It took about a year for me to just sit there and ponder this and think it over and think it over and think it over, but I finally made the right decision. But he says, at one time you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. When we're in the world, when we're outside of God, we are. I like how he personifies that. Not you're in darkness, you are darkness. You're part of the world. And the world is what is railing against me. The world is what's coming against me. The world is my enemy. And you were part of that. You were the darkness. But now you're in the light. So what I need you to do is when you come into the light as a New Testament Christian, as a child of God, I need you to walk as one. Don't have one foot in one side and one foot in the other. You can't straddle that difference between light and dark. You can't do it. You have to go completely into the light. Like all those shows, you walk into the light. That's exactly what he wants us to do. He wants us to walk into the light. And once we're in the light, don't go back into darkness. You know, if you were in a cave and you couldn't, you're wandering around, you're finally finding, you have your hands on the walls and you're stumbling over things trying to get out, and all of a sudden you see this tiny little dot of dark or light, and you start walking towards it because that's a beacon. You know, if it's light, that means the light's coming from somewhere. I want to go where that is because I can get out of the darkness. Nobody wants to be lost in a cave, I don't think. So you get up there and you finally struggle through, and there's this tiny little opening, and you get in and you look out and you realize I made it out. I got out. I went to the light. The light drew me out. It pulled me out. It allowed me to find my way out of this darkness. How many people, once they get out, they take their breath, maybe get a drink of water, and say, you know, I'm going back in? People do that all the time. It's humorous to us because we know the truth. But people do it all the time. I don't understand it. It's a mystery to me how somebody, after they've been in the light, after they've walked in the light, and they realize where they were in the darkness, they still, of their own volition, go back into the darkness. I think it's because they don't truly realize that they were in the darkness. They look at it and they say, I had more fun. I had more fun in the world. You know, coming to Christ has been great. You know, I like being saved, but I had to give up so much. And I really I can't do this anymore. You know, we look at the analogy of climbing out of a cave into the light and then going back into the cave. See, unfortunately, that's figurative. If it were literal, nobody would go back into the world. If they could see it literally, nobody would go back into the world. But they don't. They don't understand. Or they want to keep one foot in and one foot out. People do that all the time as well. But we know that when we become children of light, we have to walk as children of light. It's of the necessity. We can't go back into the darkness. For the fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true, and try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. So in chapter 6 and verse 11, he gives us the admonition. He says, put on the whole armor of God. Don't leave anything off. Don't leave anything out. Don't leave one thing undone. Put on the entire armor of God. Why? Why do we need to do this? Why do we have to put on this armor of light? Why can't I just stay where I was? Why can't I just say I'm in the light even though one foot's in the darkness? Why can't I just say that? Because if you don't, you will not be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. The devil hates us. He wants us to go to hell with him. And he will come up with anything he can think of to get us back where he wants us. He wants us in the dark. When we're in the dark, we don't think straight. When we're in the dark, we'll do anything. We will debase ourselves in the most unbelievable way when we're in the darkness. But when we're in the light, we want to remain in the light. We want to walk in the light. The devil is thinking all the time, how can I get this man? How can I get this woman? How can I get this child of God? I'm going to find their weakness and I'm going to exploit it. I'm going to do anything I can to get that soul because I hate them. I hate God and I hate them because they're in God, and I'm going to do anything I can to take their soul to hell with me. I want them to suffer as I'm going to suffer. Can you imagine that thought process? But that's exactly what he's thinking. He is a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. He wants to eat us whole. I wish people feared the devil the way they should fear the devil. He wants to rip us apart. And he's gotten his teeth into so many souls, but you know what? That's not enough for him. You think, hey, I've got enough. I've got an army of people that I'm going to take to hell with me. He says, I want one more. I want one more. I want one more. That's his mindset. He's in the darkness and he wants us to go back into the darkness. So we're supposed to be able to stand against the schemes of the devil and make a defense for the hope that is in us. So in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 1 Peter 3 and verse 15. So this armor of God, with the breastplate of righteousness, I can go anywhere. I can withstand the darts of the devil. With my shoes of readiness, I'm prepared to go where I'm told to meet my Maker in the course of time. With a shield of faith, I can defend against the attacks of the evil one and his servants. My helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit tell everyone who sees me who I belong to. What can happen if I am lacking, though, in any part of this armor? If I leave off any part of this, what can happen to me? Well, in verse 13, therefore take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. You know, in the army, you're not even allowed into the field if you're not fully equipped. Nowadays, they want to make sure you have everything you need before they send you out there. They make sure that you're completely prepared. Nothing is left undone. Is the Lord's army any less important? Absolutely not. It's more important. It's far more important. Should I be properly equipped to go into the field? So what we need to do is we need to put on that armor, soldiers, and we need to get in the field. We need to put on the armor and get into the field. It's not enough to put on the armor and sit at home and say, well, somebody else will go out there. They'll take care of it. You know, that's somebody else's job. We got to put on the armor, and then we got to get out in the field. We got to fight. So Colossians chapter 3 and verse 12. We put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. You know, in each of these character traits in verse 12, it gives us a glimpse of the Christian that God has in mind. You know, seeing as we are God's chosen ones, He has a vision for us that even we don't have for ourselves. How can I do anything? Who am I? God has this in mind. He knows who we are and He knows what we can do. The idea that we're holy is often not something we have in mind about ourselves. I'm just a guy. I'm just a woman. How am I holy? We're separate and we're sanctified. Holy and beloved. And it puts us in the company of Jesus Himself. Jesus is our brother. We're to put on compassionate hearts, not only for those of the body, but those in the world. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 36, it says, when He saw the crowds, He had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. So we have a kinship with Christ. We have compassion as Christ had compassion. We put on kindness, which is a generous type of kindness. This idea that we want to do whatever we can do. These are the things that we put on as New Testament Christians. Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 7. Ephesians 2 and verse 7. So that in the coming ages He might show the immeasurable riches of His grace in kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. God is generous in His kindness. It's not the kind of kindness that extends to, say, holding the door open for somebody as they're walking through. That is a kindness. This is a kindness that goes far beyond that. It excels in so many ways. He extends enormous grace in forgiving us of our sin, and He gifts us with salvation through Christ. We put on humility. We put on meekness. We put on patience. And the last three here are intertwined. Each one of them informs the others. They all involve being gentle with one another and dwelling together as Christians. We put others first and ourselves second. And that's hard for the world to do. It's hard for Christians to do sometimes. Many times we retain that selfishness that we had when we walked in darkness, and we say, well, why are my needs not being attended to? Why am I not being taken care of? And that's our mindset sometimes. Why? Instead of, hey, what can I do for my brother or sister? It's why am I not taking care? Listen, that's why a lot of people, that's the methodology a lot of people use in choosing a congregation. I want to go where my needs can be taken care of. I want to go where I'm going to be ministered to. I've always said that you grow where God plants you. Find a place where you can be of use to God, and that's where you go. That's where you stay. This is who needs you, not where can I go and people will attend to my needs. A lot of people use that when they try to figure out where they want to attend services. It's unfortunate. But anyway, we put other people's first, and we put ourselves second. We put up with each other's shortcomings. And we do our best to build each other up in the faith. That's something that we do. We put on when we put on kindness. In Colossians chapter 3 and verse 14, this is the most important one. This is where we'll end this. What do we put on as Christians? And above all of these things that I've told you, the most important one is this. You put on love. Love. The agape love that God shows towards us, that Christ showed towards us, this is the love that we're to put on. We are to show love above all things. It's supposed to manifest itself, and everything that we do is supposed to be based in love, because that's what we put on as New Testament Christians. What does it do? It binds everything together. How? In perfect harmony. You know, I've been part of very few places that were together in perfect harmony. You know, because we're human and we make human mistakes. But if we all put on together love, then the church is a place of perfect harmony. You know, is it a unreachable ideal? I think as long as we are human, and as long as we sin, as long as we do things that are contrary to God, then I don't know if it's attainable as long as that's in place. But I do know this: if everyone here said, you know what, above all things that I do, everything that I do is going to be based in love for my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, we can have the closest thing to a utopia that we can find on this earth. The church is it. There is no other place. I'm telling you now. Throughout the history of the world, there have been people who have said, hey, we're going to have a society that's going to be based on mutual this and together this and all of these things. But you know what? Nothing has begun to compare it to the church. Especially that vision that we get of it in the first century, where they loved one another. They had all things in common. They took care of one another, and everything was based on their desire to build up each other in the faith. You know, we can have that. We can have the first century church. That's what we want to have. You know, we're not looking for 21st century church. What we want, if we want to progress as a church, we need to have a first century church. If we have a first century church, God's going to look at us and He's going to say, behold my children, in whom I am well pleased. If you haven't put on these things, you need to put on these things. If you haven't put on the armor of light, if you're here this morning and you haven't put on Christ in baptism, you still haven't put on the armor of light. You're still in darkness. You're still in that cave feeling your way around. You know, we walk around in daylight. There are people who walk around, they think they know what they're doing, and they're in darkness. They're really stumbling around looking for the path out. They just don't know it because it's not literal enough for them. If you're outside of Christ, then you're in darkness and you need to come out of darkness. Walk towards the light, as they say in the movies. Walk towards the light. The light beckons you. It wants you to be there. And if you're in the light, walk as a child of light. And there are some maybe here this morning who are not walking as children of light. They're keeping one foot in darkness and one foot in light. Whatever, if you need to make a change, whatever change you need to make, if we can pray for you, if we can pray with you, if you need to be baptized into Christ, we want to do that for you this morning. Whatever needs you might have, make it known. Come while we stand and while we sing.